You've been there. You took her out, paid for dinner, stayed attentive, gave her your time, your presence, your best energy. For a moment, you thought it mattered, and then, silence. She disappears. No explanation, no gratitude, just absence. The weight you feel isn't only the sting of rejection, it's the moment you realize you were playing a game without knowing the rules. This is where most men break. They tell themselves, maybe she just wasn't interested. Maybe it's bad timing. Maybe I wasn't her type. But beneath those excuses, there's a deeper truth you've never allowed yourself to face. You weren't rejected because you weren't good enough. You were used because you gave without understanding the exchange that was happening. Picture a warhorse, massive, powerful, bred for battle. But place that same animal inside a circus, and his power becomes nothing but a spectacle. He no longer fights wars. He entertains children. That's what happens when a man hands over his strength without discernment. You're still powerful, but your power is misused. You're still capable, but your capability has been reduced to tricks. This illusion of control is the silent poison. You think you're choosing her. You think you're leading the dynamic. In truth, you've surrendered authority without realizing it. And the moment you place all of your value in what she thinks, you stop being a man with direction and become an instrument for her validation. And here's the part you've probably never admitted out loud. Deep down, you knew something was off. You felt it. The imbalance. The subtle way you kept giving while she kept pulling away. You told yourself, if I just give a little more, she'll see who I am. But she never did. She wasn't blind. She simply didn't need to see. You had already handed her the power without her asking. What most men never realize is that the cycle doesn't begin when she asks for something. It begins the moment you offer without being asked. The moment you bend your time, your plans, your center, hoping that sacrifice will buy you intimacy. That's the invisible transaction. That's the reason you wake up feeling hollow. And if you think this is just bad luck, or the fault of a few women with bad intentions, you're wrong. It's not luck. It's not chance. It's a pattern, a test, one that every man faces without even knowing it's happening. And when you fail that test, something inside you starts to fracture. If you think this is just about being unlucky with women, wait until you understand the invisible test she's giving you right now. That's where the truth begins. Mark was 38 when it happened. She wasn't a stranger on the street, or some girl from a bar. She was a colleague, someone who had been around him for months. They laughed together at work, exchanged inside jokes, and he began to imagine that maybe, finally, he had found something real. But when the shift ended, and the lights in the office went out, her words were always the same. Can you give me a ride home? She never said, let's get a drink. Never, I want to see you outside of here. Only favors. Small requests, at first. Can you help me with this project? Then, could you pick up my lunch? Soon he was rearranging his life to accommodate hers. Mark told himself it was the natural way to show interest. In truth, he was being measured. This is the invisible test. It doesn't appear like a test. Because it isn't consciously designed, it is instinct. A woman may not even know she is doing it, but her unconscious does. And the question it asks is brutal. If I remove affection, will you still stand? Or will you bend and hand over your strength anyway? Mark bent. He gave, and gave, and gave. Until one day, when she found a new man, the one who didn't. Benji didn't even tell Mark goodbye. He was never her man. He was her utility. The invisible test takes many forms. It's the unanswered message you send late at night, and the silence that follows. It's the playful insult she drops, just to see how you'll react. It's the way she cancels plans at the last minute, just to measure if your time has value, or if it belongs entirely to her. These aren't conscious manipulations. They're unconscious probes into your spine. The unconscious female mind is wired to seek stability, strength, and presence. And if your presence collapses the moment she withholds approval, you've already revealed yourself. You've felt this before. The unanswered text that left you spiraling, rereading the conversation, wondering if you said something wrong. The irony is that it wasn't about the text at all. It was about the silence. The silence was the test. Would you hold your ground, keep your center, remain whole? Or would you chase, explain, beg, adjust, just to win back the comfort of her attention? Every man remembers the first time he failed this test. The sting of being ignored. The hollow feeling of realizing you were auditioning for a role that was never going to be given to you. And here's the truth most never grasp. Women are not seeking to break you. They are seeking to see if you are already broken. It's not rejection. It's revelation. It reveals whether your confidence is rooted in yourself or in her reaction. Whether you carry value when she withholds affection, or if your entire sense of worth evaporates with her silence. The tragedy is that most men never see it for what it is. They confuse it with bad luck, mixed signals, or simple cruelty. They never realize they are standing in front of a mirror, and the reflection staring back is their own hunger to be chosen. That is why the test feels like betrayal. It doesn't only expose her behavior, it exposes the fragility inside of you. And once you've failed enough of these tests, something darker begins to happen. You start adjusting before she even asks. You start bending before there is pressure. You start offering before there is need. And in that cycle, you no longer recognize yourself. Stand in front of a mirror long enough, and you begin to notice the cracks. At first they seem small, almost invisible. But once your eyes find them, they spread everywhere. That's how need feels. It begins quietly, an innocent hope that she texts back. A small desire to know you matter to her hand, then it becomes the fracture that runs through your entire reflection. When a man's desire turns into need, he doesn't just want her attention, he requires it. And when you require it, you are no longer choosing her. You are pleading with her. That is the difference between presence and dependence. Presence says, I desire you, but I remain whole without you. Dependence whispers, without you, I am incomplete. A woman can feel the difference instantly. She doesn't have to think about it. It's instinct. Her body tightens, her tone shifts, her attraction fades. She begins to see you, not as a man standing before her, but as an object reaching for her energy. Picture the man staring at the broken mirror. Each time he tries to glue the pieces back together, the sharp edges cut his skin. That's what happens when you try to repair the reflection of your worth through someone else's validation. The more you reach for her to heal the emptiness inside you, the deeper the wound becomes. You don't notice that your blood is on the glass. You only notice that the cracks keep spreading. This is why the pursuit of reassurance backfires. The moment your gestures carry fear, they lose their value. You take her out, not because you enjoy her company, but because you're terrified she might drift away. You compliment her, not because you genuinely admire her, but because you're begging for a return stroke to keep your ego alive. And she knows. Women may forgive many flaws, but they do not forgive the smell of desperation. Dependence doesn't just push her away, it reduces you. You stop being a man with a direction and become a man orbiting her mood. Every smile lifts you. Every silence destroys you. That's not attraction, that's slavery. And the chain is forged in your own mind. The deeper tragedy is that you start believing this is love. You tell yourself, I'm just committed. I'm just loyal. But loyalty born of fear is not loyalty. It is servitude. A man who cannot stand without her cannot truly stand with her. And in time, she no longer looks at you as a partner. She looks at you as a tool, an emotional crutch, a reliable response, a background presence. Useful, but not desired. You are not being punished, you are being revealed. The mirror doesn't lie. It shows you that you have mistaken dependency for connection. And as long as you keep trying to repair your reflection through her approval, the cracks will multiply. But there is a darker dynamic at work. One most men never recognize until it's too late. When your need grows, her desire shrinks. The scale is uneven, and every ounce of effort you add only deepens the imbalance. This is the game of emotional scarcity. And once you fall into it, you lose without even noticing. In nature, nothing abundant is revered. The fruit that falls to the ground is ignored, stepped on, forgotten. The fruit high on the branch, unreachable without effort, is the one that sparks hunger. This is not a lesson about fruit, it's a lesson about value. When your presence is too available, when your energy is poured out without measure, you stop being seen as treasure and start being treated as background. The game of emotional scarcity is cruel because it operates beneath awareness. You keep giving more, believing generosity will make her stay. Yet, with every extra hour, every sacrifice, every unanswered call, followed by another attempt, her interest shrinks. Not because she is cold, but because the unconscious mind assigns value based on effort and cost. What is given endlessly is priced at nothing. What is rare is pursued. This is not cynicism. It is biology. Think of the men who chase with constant texts, flowers, endless reassurances. They believe persistence will prove devotion. Instead, each gesture depletes their currency. The more abundant the resource, the less it is valued. Women don't consciously decide this. It is felt, instinctively, like gravity. Her nervous system records every move. How quickly you respond, how much you bend, how easily you hand over your attention. When it registers as unlimited, it registers as unworthy of pursuit. The hardest part for men to accept is this: she does not withdraw to hurt you. She withdraws because you have robbed the dynamic of scarcity. Attraction thrives on tension, and you've left none. She cannot be drawn toward what is already at her feet. So she looks elsewhere, not always for someone better, but for someone she has to reach for. This is why insistence never builds connection, it corrodes it. The constant pursuit, the endless reassurance, the blind persistence, they don't make you stand out. They bury you in invisibility. Because when you are everywhere, you are nowhere. When you are always available, you are never missed. Men often protest, but I'm just showing her that I care. Yes, you care, but care without boundaries becomes consumption. It is the equivalent of pouring fine wine into a plastic cup until it overflows onto the floor. There's no reverence in excess. There's only waste. The irony is devastating. You give more in order to be loved more, and in giving more, you ensure you'll be loved less. You try to fill the gap with more presence, but it is your absence that would have restored balance. True scarcity isn't about vanishing. It's about selectivity. It's about your time carrying weight, because it isn't handed out like loose change. And once you see this clearly, the question becomes unavoidable. How do you break the cycle of excess, of bending, of bleeding yourself out? There is only one weapon that shifts the dynamic instantly. A word most men fear to speak, but the only word that commands respect. The word is no. James was dependable, always ready, always available, always the man she could lean on. If she needed a ride, he was there. If she needed to vent, he listened. If she needed help moving furniture, he counseled his own plans to show up. He thought this was loyalty. He thought this was love. But what he didn't realize was that he wasn't her partner, he was her safety net. Until one day, after months of bending, She called him in a rush, asking him to help her move apartments. James was exhausted from work, his body sore, his spirit drained. For the first time, something in him shifted. He said, "No, I can't today." The line went silent. She hung up. For 3 days, there was nothing. And then, out of nowhere, she called not to ask for help, but to check on him. That single refusal changed the entire dynamic. This is the paradox of no. It feels like the most dangerous word a man can use, yet it is the most powerful. It is the word that separates the man who is consumed from the man who commands. Women do not consciously crave a servant. They unconsciously crave a man who can protect his boundaries. Because only a man with boundaries can protect anything at all. A fortress without walls is not a fortress. It is an invitation for invasion. Saying no is not cruelty. It is clarity. It communicates, without words, that your time has value, that your energy is not infinite, and that your presence is not a resource to be drained. It forces her to reckon with the reality that you are not an object orbiting her needs, you are a man with direction, and in that recognition, attraction begins to return. Most men resist this truth because they are terrified of loss. They fear that if they say no, she will walk away. What they don't see is that by never saying no, she has already walked away in spirit. She may still answer your calls, still accept your favors, but the desire is gone. The respect is gone. She is no longer drawn to you as a man. She is only using you as a utility. A man who cannot say no cannot create respect. And a man without respect cannot sustain attraction. No cuts deeper than 1,000 yeses. It is the moment you reclaim your spine. It is the moment she sees you not as background, but as a presence. Not because you pushed her away, but because you finally stood still. Boundaries are not walls that block love. They are gates that guard it. Without them, there is no sanctuary. Only chaos. And here is the revelation few men ever discover. Once you learn to say no, you don't just change her behavior, you change your own. You begin to feel the weight of your time, the value of your energy, the strength of your presence. And when you carry that energy, something unexpected happens. Silence itself begins to work in your favor. Silence has always unnerved men. When she doesn't reply, when she doesn't call, when she withdraws into distance, you feel a knot forming in your chest. That knot drives most men into action. Messages sent too soon, calls made too quickly, words spilling out only to fill the emptiness. But what if silence was never the enemy? What if silence was the weapon you never knew you had? A man who understands the power of silence carries an invisible blade. His strength is not in chasing, not in proving, not in overwhelming her with presence. His strength is in withholding. Not as a game, not as manipulation, but as recognition of his value. He knows his energy is not free. He knows his time is not cheap. He knows his attention is not something to be thrown into the void. So he lets silence speak for him. And when silence speaks, it says, "I am not desperate. I am not begging. I am whole, with or without you." Imagine this. She sends a message that once would have pulled you into immediate response. Instead, you pause, you breathe, you wait, not out of anger, but out of composure. Hours pass, a day passes. When you finally answer, your words are measured, deliberate, without rush. Suddenly, the dynamic has shifted. The man who once poured himself out is now a man who holds back, and she feels it. That absence creates presence. That gap creates weight. For the first time, she is the one leaning forward, reaching, wondering. Silence reveals what noise cannot. It uncovers whether she truly values you, or if she only valued the constant drip of your attention. It forces her to recognize that your presence is not a guarantee, but a choice, and choices carry power. This is not about disappearing or playing tricks. It is about recovery. Silence is the time you take to recharge, to recenter, to reclaim the parts of yourself you gave away. 2. Unsee. When you vanish from her phone for a day, you are not punishing her, you are restoring yourself. And that restoration is magnetic. A man who draws from his own well does not come across as needy. He comes across as rare. The test of silence is simple. Choose one moment where you would normally react instantly. Resist, hold, delay. Not with resentment, but with certainty. Then watch. You'll see something shift, not only in her, but in yourself. You will feel the strength of restraint, the confidence of composure. The magnetism of absence. This is the turn most men never take. They fear silence, so they drown it in words and gestures. But silence is not emptiness. Silence is presence multiplied. And when you master it, desire begins to return, not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped feeding it with weakness. There comes a point when every man must decide whether he will keep living bent under the weight of need, or whether he will rise and walk upright again. That decision does not come in a single moment of anger or defiance. It comes in the quiet recognition that being used was never her power. It was your blindness. It was the way you forgot yourself. In the pursuit of her, it was the way you traded your presence for scraps of attention, believing scraps were love. A man who never kneels again is not a man who hates women or rejects intimacy. He is a man who has understood the price of giving himself away too cheaply. He has learned that desire built on desperation corrodes, while desire built on strength endures. He has seen how generosity without boundaries is exploitation disguised as romance. He has looked in the broken mirror, seen his own blood, and finally stopped reaching. That stopping, that moment of restraint, is the beginning of sovereignty. Sovereignty is not dominance. It is not arrogance. It is quiet command over yourself. It is the ability to say yes without fear, and no without apology. It is walking into a room not to be chosen, but to choose. It is being with her not because you need her to complete you, but because you already stand complete. That is the energy she cannot resist. Not the endless yes, not the constant pursuit, but the presence of a man who does not kneel. The pain of being used leaves scars. But scars are not weakness. Scars are reminders. They remind you of the price of forgetting your own value. They remind you that your time is finite, your energy sacred, your presence irreplaceable. And when you carry that memory, you no longer move like a man begging to be noticed. You move like a man who knows he is already whole. That shift is what changes everything. She feels it. The world feels it. You feel it, most of all. Do not imagine that the journey ends here. This is not the conclusion, it is the foundation, because once you reclaim your presence, once you stand without kneeling, a greater question rises in front of you. What does it mean to be a man in today's world? What is the true essence of masculinity now that the old rules have crumbled? That is where the path continues. Brother, this video is only the surface. If something inside you shifted today, don't ignore it. The next step of your journey is already waiting. The link is below. There you'll find books and guides that have shaped thousands of men, weapons you can carry so you will never kneel without purpose again. Choose one. Dive into it. Transform what you've learned here into real power. Subscribe to this channel, because this series is a path, and each week you'll receive the next piece. Share this with a brother who needs to hear it. This isn't just about you. It's about an entire generation of men awakening. And there is still much to understand, which defines everything. The day she called me weak. This is the next chapter of this journey. Click now and find out.